yeah. Trying to up my credentials as a YouTube guy. Yeah, I have it's a guitar. Yeah, it works. Yeah, it's real. So I've got that going for me. Subscribe. Okay. Am I really gonna do this? Oh. You want to start an apartment carpentry series. Apartmentry. Great name. It's great. Show people what they can do in their apartments. You don't have any woodworking power tools. Do you really want to piss off one of the brands that could possibly sponsor this channel one day? Am I gonna do it? I only have two things because Milwaukee tools are nice as a consumer, but wow, they are not cheap. There we go. Not even sponsored by them. But before we do this, I think I need to go get a beer. Once I have my dinner and have my not beer, we'll get back to it. I wanted to say the mortgaging of a great American brand, but the problem is that a mortgage implies that an obligation is going to be met by future cash flows. And what's actually happening is they took a brand that was a titan in the industry, and they've taken that and they have now basically kept prices high while doing everything they can to decrease the cost of manufacturing the tools to make as much profit as possible. I don't know what the right word for that is, the right metaphor. Mortgaging, pillaging, I don't know, pirate motif, violating. I think really what it comes down to though is they're destroying it, and it's an unfortunate thing that I see happening in a lot of different parts of the economy to a lot of different brands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to the Milwaukee story. All right, so let's get into their business model. It's pretty straightforward. They make a really good quality product driven by investments in R&D and really understanding who their customers are. Then they sell that product at a premium price point, usually through distributors directly to professionals or through retailers to people like me and you. The Milwaukee Electric Tool Company was originally founded in 1924 by a guy named Albert Siebert, and it came out of a bankrupt partnership between him and a guy named A.H. Peterson that they originally developed called the A.H. Peterson Tool Company, which was built off of the invention that A.H. Peterson had made, which was a 1/4-inch drill that was powered by a Westinghouse electric motor back in 1918, which at that point was the first in the world to actually have an electric tool like that, not something that was powered off of a big steam generator. So it's kind of a funny classic American story where it seems like the guy, Albert, who had the money, is the one who wound up founding the company and getting all the benefits of having a successful company, not the guy who had the original idea and invention, A.H. Peterson. Don't know how I feel about that. In 1930, the Milwaukee Electric Tool Company was contracted by the U.S. Navy to develop things like sanders, electric hammers, polishers, and hand grinders for use in naval shipyards. In 1935, they were the first in the world to develop an electric handheld hammer drill, a 3/4-inch hammer drill, which was used to drive fittings into concrete, which again was a first of its kind innovation. And in 1949, they developed a spring clutch, which went into all their tools, which decreased recoil and allowed them to increase the power in these hand tools, which made them even better than they already were. And they also developed a 90-degree drill, which helped plumbers and electricians drill holes through a lot of different fittings in a lot of tight spaces. And then in 1951, probably their most famous invention, like I mentioned earlier, was the reciprocating sawzall. It was the very first reciprocating saw with a series of blades developed that could cut through pretty much anything in a handheld tool. So between its founding in 1924 and the sawzall coming out in the 50s, this was really an unprecedented run of innovation and first-of-its-kind tools that were brought to the public. A modern analog to this is Apple, with their huge run of success from the original Macintosh into the iPod, into the iPhone. That huge run of innovation and just world-changing technology, Milwaukee very much so fits that mold and did it 100 years before Apple did. On top of all of the success, in 1974, they opened up a 212,000 square foot headquarters building in Wisconsin, and then they also invested in a huge manufacturing facility in Jackson, Mississippi to keep up with demand for all of their revolutionary and high quality tools. And then the bankers got involved. Why do the bankers always get involved? In 1986, the company was bought by Merrill Lynch, and about 9 years later, it was sold to a Swedish conglomerate called Atlas Copco. And then in 2005, for $627 million, it was sold to Tektronic Industries, a Chinese conglomerate that also owns brands like Ryobi, Hoover, ShopVac, things like that. TTI, as they're known, has milked this brand for all it's worth. And it wasn't until 2012 where Milwaukee actually introduced something new, which was their M18 Fuel line of tools, which is a high power density lithium ion battery chemistry paired with pretty high quality brushless motors, which makes, honestly, a pretty solid quality tool today. But between 1974 and 2012, they didn't have a single innovation with the tools that they offered. It was all bankers exchanging hands with this company, trying to make as much money as possible on the back of the brand reputation and the historic sales success it had in its first 50 years of existence. And unfortunately, that has been turbocharged now with Chinese ownership, where a lot of the manufacturing is no longer done in the US. It's been offshored. Most of it is done in China. Some of it's done in Mexico. Some of it's done in Germany. Very, very small amount is still done in the US. And what TTI has done is decrease the quality of tools to make a buck. I had this idea that wound up going nowhere because nobody wants to buy repaired tools, but I bought broken Milwaukee tools off of eBay. A lot of them were just the brushed ratchets, the 1/4 inch, the 3/8 inch drive electric ratchets, and I repaired them and tried to sell them for, $20-$30 more than I actually spent on them. Well, I'm not selling anything, but I learned some interesting things while I was doing these repairs. And inside of that ratchet, there's a planetary gear set that sits on top of the motor, the main drive, and that planetary gear set has a carrier that the planet gears sit on. And older models had a metal planetary gear set, newer ones had plastic ones, and the newest ones I could find, the entire drive set was all plastic. Which is interesting though, because it wasn't the plastic parts that necessarily failed, it was the drive pin, because there's a tiny little offset pin that would spin around and actually articulate the ratcheting mechanism, and that pin would snap right off in no time. And the pawls inside of the ratchet head would also strip out very easily, made of some kind of very soft metal. All that to say is planned obsolescence.
But I don't get it. That what they don't seem to understand is the reason why people pay you money is because you make something that's worth paying for. And if you stop doing that, people are gonna stop giving you money. Yeah. Just providing further proof that I am actually a bona fide YouTube guy. I have a Marshall amplifier too. And if you stop making a product that's worth paying for, people will stop paying you money. But also, having the superior product, the superlative product, will keep people coming back to your brand. And that is what builds true brand equity, brand loyalty, and long-term value. And what all these companies and all these private equity firms and all these bone-headed executives that think they're brilliant business people, the only thing that they're actually doing, they are taking the value and the brand equity that somebody else better than them built over years and years and years of hard work and dedication and customer focus, and they are destroying it. They are making the product as cheap as possible to continue the price premium that was earned by the decades of work prior to them, and cutting the quality of the product, making something subpar, and increasing profits.
But I'm really torn because the brushless fuel series that they have, it feels good. It's heavy in the hand, it's fast, it's responsive, it's got high torque. The plastic that they use in the fittings, in the molds, is really high quality, and it feels good. I wanted this to be a story about how an American brand was just gutted by foreign owners, but it's not that simple, because they still make pretty good stuff. But it does remind me of some other brands too, that sold from the original owners, who were the innovators, the ones relentlessly focused on quality. Fender, the electric guitar company, when it was still owned by Leo Fender, some of the best models of amplifiers and guitars you can buy today are still the original 1950s, 1960s models of Fender. But it was sold to Columbia Records, then it was sold to another conglomerate, and none of it's made in America anymore, and it's just not the same. Same thing happened with Craftsman. They used to be all made in America, and now with Sears going belly up, most of that stuff is made in China now. And I'm not saying that foreign ownership is a bad thing. I mean, obviously, American companies can't run the entire global economy, and it would make no sense for that. And there are a lot of other countries that have a lot of amazing products out there. It is interesting to see this pattern, though, because Milwaukee recently invested like $200 million in an R&D facility back in Wisconsin. And what we see is the intellectual knowledge, the intellectual property, the R&D, the high education, high value research and development stuff stays in the US. Like Apple, I mean, they design all of their own silicon chips in California. And then all of the labor and all of the, you know, frankly, dirty, difficult, sometimes dangerous manufacturing work we offshore. And the US protects those interests in industry using a very, very, very large global military presence. I'm digressing here a little bit because Milwaukee is owned by a Chinese company, and so it's not quite what's happening. But we do see a general trend away from skilled labor and more towards knowledge work in the US. And part of me is happy about that. Part of me doesn't know how to feel.
Because oftentimes, the way that people make products even cheaper is they offshore them. They take away jobs from Americans. And the problem that we have in this country when we think about economics and capitalism, we see the market of American consumers as only consumers, people only thinking about price and thinking about a product to buy. And we're all far more than consumers. Yeah, maybe the drill is going to be cheaper now, but the people in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who used to actually make these tools, took pride in it, had a community, had a job, had a career, had a family because of that. What about them?
And I really don't know how to feel about that because I work a knowledge job at a desk, white collar, highly paid, don't need to worry about breaking my back to feed myself. But my dad grew up working on a farm and stringing vineyards and unloading 100-pound bags of sugar at the Welch's plant in Erie. And his dad spent his career building locomotives at the GE locomotive plant in Erie. And before that, he worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And his dad was a pit boss in a Pittsburgh steel mill. So I come from that background and I'm not that far removed from it. And so I'm very conflicted. So I'm going to end it there. I wish it was more clear cut and I could say yes, great, or no, bad. But the reality of the Milwaukee Electric Tool Company is complicated because they still make a good product. It's good enough for 90% of the people out there. They're not terribly overpriced. They're not made in America anymore. They were accused of using slave labor in the Uyghur population in China too, which is, oh. And they're profiting off the back of a great legacy that was built by Americans in the United States. So tune back next week for more great consumer buying advice.